All right, Khan, Shalom, Shalom, Israel, Shalom to the Torah tribes. Yasha Allah, giving the course, all honor, Lord, praise to the Most High God, Yahweh, in the name of the only God, Son Yahweh Shai. Right, this is Brother Yasha Allah coming back to y'all with yet another video through the Spirit by Yahweh, by Shema Mashak, Mama Like Yahweh Shai. All right, Shalom, Shalom. All right, Shabbat Shalom to all that's observing it today, Friday night, sundown to Saturday, sundown, through the Spirit by Yahweh, Shema Yahweh Shai. All right, and I'm getting straight into this, right? I'm gonna get straight into this. It's going into basically as you can see from the title of this video, the parable of the two creditors, right? Found in the book of Luke chapter 7. So I'm gonna share my screen. Salaki, I'm gonna share my screen during a little willing for the duration of this video. Uh so yeah, calm. But let's get straight into this, right? The parable of the two creditors. So I'm gonna start at I'm start up a little bit, right? Because the parable really starts Salaki at verse 40, right, or 41. I'm gonna start at verse 36, right? Let's go to Luke chapter 7 and verse 36. And one of the Pharisees desired him that he would eat with him. And he went into the Pharisee's house and sat down to meat. And behold, a woman in the city, which was a sinner, when she knew that Yahushua sat at meat in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster box of ointment. So this woman that was in the city, the author of Luke, right? Luke mentions this, that she's a sinner, right? That she's a sinner. Nevertheless, though she was titled a sinner, she came to Yahushua to sit at meat with him in the Pharisee's house, and she brought what? She brought an alabaster box of ointment. She didn't want to come empty-handed before the Lord. So already we see that this woman, she knows what's going on. Even though she's a sinner, she actually does know what's going on and desires mercy of the Lord. We know that the Most High, he requires some sacrifice, right? Let's go to the book of Sirach, chapter 35. The Lord said, thou shalt not appear before him empty. It's the book of Sirach, chapter 35 and verse 4. Thou shalt not appear empty before the Lord, right? For all these things are to be done because of the commandment. The offering of the righteous maketh the altar fat, and the sweet savior thereof is before the Most High. So the Lord said that thou shalt not appear before him empty. So we don't want to appear before the Lord empty, right? She came to the Lord with a alabaster box of ointment. And we're going to go how deep that is, right? And how much that actually cost back in the ancient world, right? But I'm going to keep going, right? Now, alabaster box of ointment, I would just look this up real quick just so we can get a visual, if we can, right? Alabaster box, ointment, oils, and perfumes used to put in vessels made of alabaster to keep them pure and unspoiled, right? What was the ointment in the alabaster box, right? Type of oil was it, right? So it's saying it's an expensive perfume, pure nard. Let's go to images. Okay, so what this is basically a depiction of that, right? All right, so reading on. Luke chapter 7, verse 38, it says, and stood at his feet behind him weeping, and began to wash his feet with tears, right? And did wipe them with the hairs of her head, right? Let's check if everything's all right. With the hair with the hairs of his head, right? And kissed his feet and anointed them with the ointment. So she stood at his feet behind him weeping. So she was weeping. She came with this box. She was weeping and began to wash his feet with her tears and wiped them with the hairs of his head and kissed his feet and anointed them with ointment. So she was earnestly searching out and seeking the Most High. You understand? She came to him, was begging onto him, right? Now let's go to the book of First Chronicles. We see here that this woman has faith in the Lord. All right, this is First Corinthians. It's like your First Chronicles, chapter 16, and verse number 10. Glory ye in his holy name. Let the heart of them rejoice by that seek the Lord. So we want to seek the Lord like how this woman sought the Lord. She was kissing his feet. She was anointing his feet with ointment. She was crying on his feet, and it was wiping his feet, the tears with her hair. You know what I'm saying? What Eve now is going to do that? Take her hair, all right, that she paid $300 for, $200 for, to get them done and wipe the Lord's feet with it, you know? And the Lord at this time, he was highly esteemed amongst men, but at the same time, he was not. You understand? When we read the Gospels, we understand that there was a great amount of people that did believe in the Lord, that he was the Mahashiach to come, but there was also a lot of people that hated Yahushua. So by her doing this, and those that hated Yahushua was the governmental structures, right? The chief priests, the elders, the scribes, the Pharisees. These sat in Moses' seat, namely the Pharisees, pursuant to the book of Matthew, chapter 23. But she didn't care about that. She didn't care how anybody would look at it. She didn't care. She was doing it anyway, going wholeheartedly after the Lord. And that's deep within itself. That's deep. She didn't care about anybody's opinion. She didn't care about what people had to say about her. All she wanted was grace and mercy from the Most High. I pray to have this same type of faith. I pray to have this same type of earnest and fire for the Lord. Right? It says what verse 11, First Chronicles 16 and verse 11. Seek the Lord in his strength, seek his face continually. So that's what she was doing. She saw the Lord and she was seeking after him earnestly, right? Right. So she was crying on to him. She was crying on to him. And even when you read the book of Psalms, right? Actually, I'm gonna get this precept too in the book of Baruch. Right? The Lord said, being returned, seeking 10 times more. So that's what she was doing. She was seeking the Lord 10 times more. Right? It's the book of Baruch, chapter 4, and verse number 27. Be of good comfort, O my children, and cry unto God. See, when our people were always fed up with their situation and actually wanted to come back and serve the Most High, they always cried unto the Lord. That's in the book of Exodus. Nehemiah mentions that when our people cry unto the Lord, then the Lord sends them a deliverer. When you read the book of Judges, the Most High, or Israel cried unto the Lord, right? Let me get the precept. It's the book of Judges, right? Book of Judges, chapter 4 and verse 1. It says, and the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of Yahweh when Ehud was dead. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, that reigned in Hazor, the captain of whose host was Caesarea, which dwelt in Hashereth of the Gentiles. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. So it says the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. See that? By reason of what? By reason of the bondage. For he had 900 chariots of iron, and 20 years he mightily oppressed the children of Israel. But it wasn't until Israel started to cry out unto the Lord did the Lord actually hear them and delivered them. All right. I'm gonna get this in the book of Judges, right? It's the book of Judges, chapter let's see here, right? Judges chapter 3. We get Judges chapter 3 and verse number 8. It says, therefore the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan Resathaim, king of Mesopotamia, and the children of Israel served Cushan Resathaim 8 years. And when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord, and the Lord raised up a deliverer to the children of Israel, who delivered them, even Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. So it wasn't until Israel started actually crying out unto the Lord did he hear them and deliver them, right? And there's another precept in Exodus. But nevertheless, that point is kind of in the coffin through the Spirit. But when we go back to this in Luke 7 verse 38, she was crying out unto the Lord. And because of that, and she was doing all this stuff because the Lord didn't ask for that. The Lord didn't ask for her to weep on his feet, to beg onto him. The Lord never asked her that. It's not written here. You know what I'm saying? The Lord never said to do that. But she was doing it anyway. She was going above and beyond. She wasn't just sitting at his feet. She was actually crying, wiping her hair, right? Eve is very stingy about her hair. That's even hair, boom, hair, nails, whatever, man. That's the main thing that they care about, man. Right? Especially in this time and day and age right now. But it said she didn't even give a damn about that, right? It says began to wash his feet with her tears, and did wipe them with the hairs of her head, and kissed his feet and anointed them with the ointment. So she was anointing this precious box of oil with that ointment with his feet, right on his feet, right. I'm gonna keep going. Verse 39. Now when the Pharisee which had bidden him saw it, he spake within himself, saying, This man, if he were a prophet, would have known who and what manner of woman this is that toucheth him, for she is a sinner. Right? So she said, so this Salakia, right? So this Pharisee was like, look, man, if this woman, if Yahushua just knew, if he only knew, right? If he only knew who this was, hey, these Pharisees in the proud spirit, man. He said, which had bidden him, saw it. He spake within himself, saying, This man, if he were a prophet, so he's already doubting that Yahushua is a prophet, right? Would have known who and what manner of woman this is that touched him, for she is a sinner. So because she's a sinner, the Pharisee is saying, look, I don't even know why he is letting this happen. I don't understand it. She's a sinner. We don't deal with them. We don't deal with sinners. You even have that when you read the book of John, right? You even have that when you read the book of John. I'm gonna get this real quick, right? I'm gonna get this real quick. The Pharisee said unto the blind man, or the one that was born blind, right? So actually, yeah, I'm gonna pull this up on the screen. All right, I can pull it up, pull it, pull it, pull it up on the screen, Salakia. This is the book of John, right? Chapter 9. Book of John, chapter 9, and verse number, right? So this is about the situation with the man. So I'm gonna go to John chapter 9, verse 13. It says, They brought to the Pharisees him that was aforetime blind. So in this chapter, Yahushua healed somebody that was blind, right? That's literally from the start of the chapter all the way down, right? And it was the Sabbath day when Yahushua made the clay and opened his eyes. Then again the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He said unto them, He put clay upon mine eyes, and I washed and do see. Right? Therefore said some of the Pharisees, this man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day. Others said, How can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? And there was a division among them. So there was already a division about whether or not Yahushua was a prophet or a man of the Most High, because these Pharisees were saying he's not keeping the Sabbath because he's healing on the Sabbath, not knowing that in the Old Testament, so-called, right? In the so-called Old Testament, we had our prophets on the Sabbath day doing wondrous works, right? On the new moons and the Sabbaths, right? So they didn't even understand that. But it says what, right? Keep going. It says, They said unto the blind man again, What sayest thou of him that he hath opened thine eyes? He said, He is a prophet, right? But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of him that received his sight. So yeah, he was born blind, right? Now I'm gonna keep going down. Here's the point, right? Verse number 24. Then again called they the man that was blind and said unto him, Give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner. Talking about the man that was born blind, right? He had, or Shalaki, talking about Yahusha, right? Verse 25. He answered and said, Whether he be a sinner or no, I know not. One thing I know, that whereas I was blind, now I see. So he was like, look, if he's a sinner, I don't know, right? I don't know, but all I know is that I can see now, and he healed me. Then say they unto him again, What did he to thee? How opened he thine eyes? He answered them, I had told you already, and ye did not hear. Wherefore would ye hear again? Will ye also be his disciples? Right? Then they reviled him. So they was getting on him. They started shaking their hand at him, right? And said, Thou art his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. So you always have that stratification between Moses and Yahushua, right? Moses and Yahushua. These Pharisees are claiming to be disciples of Moses, not knowing that Moses actually wrote of Yahushua, as Yahushua says in the book of John, right? Not knowing that it was Moses who prophesied of Yahushua in Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse 15 on down. Numbers chapter 23, right? Or Slakia, Numbers chapter 24, right? It says what? We know that the Most High spake unto Moses, as for this fellow, we know not whence he is. And they said that about Moses. And that's what's crazy. They said that about Moses. They said that to Aaron. Man, Aaron, we don't know where Moses is at when he went up to the mount, right? We don't know where Moses is at, right? As for that man, as for this man, we know not whence he is, right? They were saying the same thing about Moses, which is crazy. It says what? The man answered and said unto them, why herein is a marvelous thing that ye know not from whence he is, and yet ye have opened mine eyes. Right now, I have to get to the point, right? So now he's teaching through the Spirit, right? This is verse 34. This is the point, right? This is the point right here. They answered and said unto him, thou wast altogether born in sins, and dost thou teach us? And they cast him out. So they got mad because when he was cutting them up, right? This man that was born blind and was healed of Yahushua had the Spirit upon him. And when he was cutting them up with his words through the Spirit, they said to him, instead of saying, well, maybe you're right, or okay, well, that's a good point. They said, thou was altogether born in sins, and does thou teach us? And they cast him out. So they cast him out, kind of threw him out somewhere, right? Ostracized him. They cast him out. They said, you were born in sins. You're a sinner. You're teaching us, right? But that's the hypocrisy of the Pharisees, though. The Pharisees were sinners as well. Not all of them, right? But the Pharisees were sinners as well. That's why when the Lord says, right, I'm gonna get this real quick. He said, beware the leaven of the Pharisees, for it is hypocrisy. This is the book of Luke, chapter 12, and verse number 1. In the meantime, when they were gathered together an innumerable multitude of people, insomuch that they trode one upon another, he began to say unto his disciples, first of all, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. So he said, beware the leaven of the Pharisees, because that's hypocrisy, the doctrine. That's what that means, right? He's not talking about actual bread, right? When you go to the book of Matthew, right? This is the book of Matthew, chapter 15, and verse number 6, it says, Then Yahushua said unto them, take heed and beware the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees, right? So it's not talking about actual bread. I'm skid down. Verse 11, how is it that ye do not understand that I spake it not to you concerning bread, that ye should beware the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees? Then understood they how that he bade them not beware the leaven of the bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. So Yahushua is like, look, you got to beware of the doctrine of these men, because they will say and do not, as he teaches in the book of Matthew chapter 23. They'll say, you're born in sins. That, hey, all the while they're with sin as well. When you go to the book of John, right, chapter 8 and verses 1 on down, he said, he that is without sin cast the first stone, saying that to the Pharisees that wanted to stone and condemn a woman, but they themselves should also be condemned, right? So but we see that these Pharisees thought themselves more highly and more you know what I'm saying, they thought themselves, they put themselves, right, they exalted themselves above men. That's why the Lord said in the book of Matthew chapter 23, right, Matthew chapter 23 and verse 12, it says, and whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, and he that shall humble himself shall be exalted. That's why he says that, because the Pharisees had a problem of exalting themselves, right, above others, which is something that the Lord hates, man. When he didn't put you up there, if he didn't put you up there, then we shouldn't do it, right? If he didn't put you in that situation to be above somebody, even Moses was over the whole congregation of Israel, in so much that he was named the king in Jeshurun, over Jeshurun, meaning the king over Israel in the book of Deuteronomy, the latter chapters. So if that's the case, if he was king over Israel, he didn't walk and talk and exalt himself like somebody, though, right? He wasn't doing that. He wasn't exalting himself like somebody. Moses is written in the book of Numbers, right? In the book of Numbers, it says that Moses was the meekest man on the planet. This book of Numbers, chapter 12, and verse number 3. Now the man Moses was very meek above all the men that were upon the face of the earth. So Moses was so meek that this is written that he was so meek that he was the most meekest man upon the earth at that time, right? But he never exalted himself, right? These Pharisees, you had these Pharisees exalting themselves above this man. Yahweh literally was dealing with him on a one-on-one basis and healed his eyes and let him see. And they were saying, you were born in sins. You can't teach us nothing. So that's the pride that some of the Pharisees had. All right. And we see that even in the book of Luke chapter 7. Right. So let's go back to that though. Luke chapter 7 and verse number 39, right? Because that's why he says that, right? This man, if he were a prophet, would have known who and what manner of woman this is that touched him, for she is a sinner. He's like, I don't know why he letting this do this. You know, she's a sinner, man. Right? This and the third. This is what Yahweh Shah taught when you go to the book of Matthew, all right, chapter 9 and verse number 10, it says, and it came to pass as Yahweh Shah sat at meat in the house, behold, many publicans and sinners came and sat down with him and his disciples. So many publicans and sinners were sitting down with Yahweh Shah along with the disciples. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said unto his disciples, why eateth your master with publicans and sinners? So the Pharisees was like, why is your master, your teacher, sitting with publicans and sinners? Remember, they didn't like publicans. Publicans will be somebody that would be a tax collector, right? In Matthew 9 and 9, we know that Matthew, which is one of the 12 apostles, was a tax collector. So he would collect taxes. You understand? So it says what? Right? Why eateth your master with publicans and sinners? But when Yahweh heard that, he said unto them, they that behold need not a physician, but they that are sick. Right? But go ye and learn what that meaneth. I will have mercy and not sacrifice, for I am not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. So that's why Yahweh said that, right? He said, look, I need to be with the sick because the Lord gave me that medicine. So I have to give this medicine to the sick. See, if you were a doctor, you don't you don't have to minister on to people that's 100% healthy and they're in their good health. Doctors don't minister onto people that's in good health. Doctors minister onto people that are not in good health in order to restore them into good health. That's the whole point of a physician or a doctor, to repair and to heal people. You know, that's the whole point. So that's why Yahweh Shah's look, he was like, look, I'm a doctor. You know what I'm saying? On a spiritual, physical level. I'm healing people on a physical level. I'm healing people on a spiritual. So why in the hell will I be with people that already know what's going on? Right? Now, yeah, he was with the disciples, but even the disciples needed healed. Even they needed to be converted. Because that's why in the book of Luke, chapter 22 and verse 31 on down, he says, Simon, Simon, Satan have desired to have you that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for thee that thy faith fail not. And when thou art converted, when you are converted, right? When you're fully in this thing, strengthen thy brethren. Because even at that time, they didn't understand all things. When they were walking with Yahweh Shah, they didn't understand all things. It was not until when you go to the book of Luke, the 24th chapter, that's when their eyes were open. So like, I'm gonna get that quick precept real quick, right? Not to stray off from the topic, but just for edification's sake. It's the book of Luke, chapter 24, right? In verse number 29. But they constrain him, saying, abide with us, for it is towards evening, and the day is far spent. And he went in to tarry with them. And it came to pass, as he sat at meat with them, he took bread and blessed it, and brake and gave to them. And their eyes were open, and they knew him, and he vanished out of their sight. Right? And they said one unto another, did not our heart burn within us? Right? I believe that's what I wanted. Yeah, Khan. While he talked with us by the way, and while he opened to us the scriptures. You see that? So their hearts were burning in them, right? Right? Their eyes were burning in them. Salakia. I'm gonna skip down to verse number Salakia, right? Yeah, I'm gonna get this precept. Right, I'm gonna get this one. All right. Verse number 45, it says, Then opened he their understanding, that they might understand the scriptures, and said unto them, Thus it is written, and thus it behooved Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead the third day. So their eyes and their understanding was fully open at that time. You see that? Because Yahweh had to leave, so therefore sending down a comforter to bring all things to their remembrance. But reading on, right? So that's why saying, for she is a sinner, right? And you even have that with the parable. I might go into that a little bit later. You even have that with the parable of the publican and the sinner, and it's like the publican and the Pharisee, right? The Pharisee was praying, was all proud, while the publican was in a humble and a low state. And guess what? The Most High justified his prayer instead of the Pharisee who was proud. All right, let's go to Luke chapter 7 and verse 40. And Yahushua, so this is the start of the parable. And Yahushua answering said unto him, Simon, I have somewhat to say unto thee. And he said, Master, say on. And there was a certain creditor which had two debtors. So a creditor, if you didn't know what a creditor was, a creditor is like a money lender, somebody that loans you money, right? Which had two debtors. The one owned 500 pence and the other 50. So of course 500 pence, and this pence will be basically Roman currency, right? It was called denarii, Salakia. Yeah, see that?
Strong's G 1220. Denarion.
Denarius, containing 10, right? A Roman silver coin in the New Testament time. It took its name from it being equal to 10 asses, a number after 217 BC increased to 16, right? It was the principal silver coin of the Roman Empire, all right? Principal silver coin of the Roman Empire. Okay, that's, we don't have to get too deep into that. So somebody owed 500 pence. Of course, we know that 500 is greater than 50. All right, 500 is greater than 50. All right. So let's just convert this to dollars. All right, we don't have to know the actual currency. Yahweh is just saying this as an example. So let's just say $500 and somebody owed $50. Of course, $500. If you owe $500, that's greater of a debt than 50. You understand? So let's keep going. And when they had owed nothing to pay, so they didn't have anything to pay, he frankly forgave them both. Tell me, therefore, which of them will love him most? So even though they had nothing to pay, hey, guess what? This man that loaned them money was like, look, don't even worry about it. You owe me 500 pence. You owe me 50. It doesn't even matter, right? Just forget about it, right? It's all good. You don't have to pay me back. So it says, what? Tell me, therefore, which of them will love him most? So if you owe somebody money, let's say you owe Esau $5,000. You owe Esau $5,000. Esau wants his money, man. If he's not getting it, he's going to take everything that you own, right? And some more, right? So you don't want that to happen. Now let's say at the last second, you don't have the money. You don't have it. You might only have a few $100s. You don't have the whole 5,000. And you ready for, you trying to, like, damn, like what the hell's going to happen? So at that point, and if your Esau says, look, don't even worry about it, you're going to be like, hey, all praise to the Most High. You're going to be rejoicing. You're going to be turning up that day, bro, because your debt is forgiven, right? Now, we can apply that with Esau, but the Lord is not comparing this to Esau, though. He's comparing it to really. Now, we're actually, let me not jump the gun, so let me keep going, right? Let's go to verse 43. Simon answered and said, I suppose that he to whom he forgave most, and he said unto him, Thou hast rightly judged. So Simon's like, look, I would say the man that owed 500 pence, he loves the Lord. Or he loves that man, or is more, what I'm saying, grateful for that man because he owed 500 instead of 50. It says, right? And he said unto him, thou hast rightly judged. So Simon Peter, or sorry, Yahweh was like, okay, yeah, you're right. Verse 44. And he turned to the woman and said unto Simon, seest thou this woman? I entered into thine house. Thou gavest me no water for my feet, but she hath washed my feet with tears and wiped them with the hairs of her head. So now she's comparing and saying, look, I walked into the house. This woman is she's crying on my feet. You understand? And Khan, shalom, shalom, right? Shalom to Almighty Akim on the call. Salaki on the YouTube right now. All praises. Right? It says what? It says, I entered into thy house, thou gavest me no water for my feet. There's no account of Peter washing the Lord's feet, right? In this chapter. But she's washing the Lord's feet. Remember, Yahweh, he never asked for that, but she was doing it out of her own will and out of her own, you know what I'm saying, mission, wanting to do it, right? It says what? Out of her love and faith that she has for Yahweh, it says, but she have washed my feet with tears and wiped them with the hairs of her head. Thou gavest me no kiss. But this woman, since the time I came in, have not ceased to kiss my feet. Imagine that. This woman is just kissing the Lord's feet, man. Right? Ever since he walked into the house. And he didn't even say nothing to her, right? He didn't even say anything to her about doing this, but she's doing it because she wants to, because she has faith. She's beseeching the Most High, right? It is, if certain brothers saw Yahweh in the flesh, we knew it was Yahweh. We would probably be doing the same thing, speaking as a man, right? Speaking as a man, or just falling to his feet as John did in the book of Revelation, the first chapter. You know, weeping before him. We know that in the precepts, right? We know that in the precepts, the Lord is saying in the book of Zechariah that we will mourn for him as one that mourneth for his only son. Right? I'm gonna get that precept real quick in the book of Zechariah. This book of Zechariah, chapter 12 and verse 9. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem, and I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one that mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. You see that? So that's when that's when the elect get to see Yahweh, right, in the flesh. They're going to mourn for Yahweh, and basically lament and mourn for him, as well as, not being able to be accounted worthy to even stand before Yahweh. If we're standing before Yahweh, no man in his right mind or woman is going to think that they're actually worthy to stand before him, or to see his face, or to see his physical body. We're not worthy, right? Well, how should we be worthy? We're wicked in the world, right? We've done many sins. We neglected the body of Yahweh, right? So we wish we shouldn't be worthy for that, or the elect, they shouldn't be worthy, or they don't feel as that, but the Lord counts them worthy, nevertheless, right? Verse 46, my head with oil thou didst not anoint, but this woman have anointed my feet with ointment. Wherefore I say unto thee, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much, but to whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little. And that's the point of the parable. That's the point of all this. He's saying her sins, which are many. So he knows that her sins is many. Remember, this is Yahweh Shah, right? He knew what was in man. He knew all men. That's why he didn't commit himself unto men. He knew what was in men, right? As it states in the book of John, chapter 2. It says, what her sins, which are many, are forgiven, right? For she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little. So if you have a lot of sins that you did in the world, you have a lot of things that you did in the world, you come into this truth, you're like, damn, man. Now you use that to go 10 times harder. You use that as energy, as like gas, as like fuel. Like, damn, like I was wicked as hell in the world. I come into this truth. The Lord gave me a second chance. I got to utilize that. And we see in the prime example of this parable being put into full effect is Paul, the apostle. right? Paul the apostle is the perfect example of this parable being put into full effect, right? And we're going to demonstrate that through the precepts. The Lord's saying, to whom little is forgiven, the same love of little. If you have a little sins that you did in the world, you was never too wicked, right? We're not even going to say it like that. Let's say, because even certain people, they're born into the truth, right? Certain people are born into the truth, and that's all praise to the Most High. They never went to a strip club. They never went to a they were never in a gang. They never used drugs. You know what I'm saying? They never was wicked like that in the world. You know, just like wicked Jake, wicked Eve in the world. They was never like that. Because they were born into the truth and was raised into it. But as a personal testimony, and I know that other Akim have similar testimonies, people that's born into the truth sometimes do not have that same type of zeal and that same type of fire for the Most High, as compared to people that was living wicked in the world and was in the world for a certain period of time and came into the truth. That same type of fire and that same type of zeal is just not there for people that actually are born into this thing, because they don't have any remembrance of being wicked, because they were never in that lifestyle in the first place. Now, that's not saying that people that are born into the truth can't not be on fire. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, according to the words of Yahweh Shah, to whom little is forgiven, the same is going to love little. Of course, it's not applied to everybody, but this is general. This is a generalized statement that Yahweh Shah is making here, right? It says what? Verse 48, and he said unto her, thy sins are forgiven. Right, so I'm gonna demonstrate how this parable lines up directly with Paul the apostle's life. All right, this is the book of First Corinthians. This is the book of First Corinthians, chapter 15. You know what? I'll pull it up. The Spirit, pull it up. The Spirit. This is First Corinthians chapter 15 and verse number 9. For I am the least of the apostles, then am not meet to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of the Most High. So Paul, he's being humble right here, because he's saying, look, I'm the least in the apostles. I'm not meet to be called an apostle. You know what I'm saying? Because I persecuted the church of the Most High. He was literally, when you read the book of Acts, he was consenting, he was co-signing, he was co-signing Salaki, I gotta get it real quick. Stephen. He was co-signing Stephen's life. Or he was co-signing Stephen's death. Let's go to the book of Acts chapter 8, verse 1. And Saul was consenting unto his death, meaning unto Stephen's death, because Stephen was a martyr for Yahweh. And at that time, there was a great persecution against the church, which was at Jerusalem, and they were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles, right? And devout men carried Stephen to his burial and made great lamentation over him. As for Saul, which is Paul, he made havoc of the church, entering into every house and hailing men and women, right? Committed them to prison. So he was putting them in prison, these men and women that believe in Yahweh Shah and called upon his name. So he was persecuting the church of God, putting them in prison, putting them in wards, right? He was saying, hey, all praises to them getting killed as well, because he thought he was doing the he was doing the Most High service, as it states in the book of John, that whosoever killeth you would think that he doeth God's service, in John chapter 16, right? Verse 10, right? Let's go to 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 10, right? So he's like, look, that's why I shouldn't even be called an apostle, right? I'm a pause right there. I'm gonna get this precept on that too. It's the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse number 11. It says, I am become a fool in glorying. Ye have compelled me, for I ought to have been commended of you. For in nothing am I behind the very chiefest apostles, though I be nothing. So Paul said, look, I am nothing, right? I am nothing. It's like, look, I should be behind the chiefest apostles, man, right? But yeah, let's keep going in this. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 10. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. So he's saying, look, nevertheless, the Most High, by his grace and his mercy, I am in this truth. That's the only reason why we're in this truth. And the only reason why anybody is in this truth. The grace of the Most High. And his grace, which was bestowed upon me, was not in vain. But I labored more abundantly than they all. Yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me. And that all is talking about the men that were in the truth before him, as he states in this chapter. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 7. And after that he was seen of James, then of all the apostles, and last of all he was seen to me also as one born out of due time. So he describes himself as being born out of due time. Like he was one of the apostles that had a later coming into the truth. You know what I'm saying? He came to the truth late, is what he's saying, right? Compared to the men that was before him, like the 12 apostles. But he said, look, I labored more abundantly than they are. So if it was a race, even though these people started before him, he's saying on a humble level, I overlapped them, man. Imagine somebody starting a race, starting a run, and they're running. And here you are, you start, you start minutes after, right? Even minutes. If you start minutes after and you overlap somebody, you're fast as hell. You are gunning it, man, depending on how fast somebody is going or that person is going that started before you. But nevertheless, if you were to overlap this person, you're going hard, right? You're going hard. So Paul, he started later. But nevertheless, he's saying, look, on a humble level, I overlapped it. I'm laboring more abundantly. Right? Yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me. And we see that because look, he was like, look, I persecuted the church, and he took that. He took that and used it as energy, right? Or motivation rather. He used it as motivation to serve the Most High just that much more harder. Because he knew that he was wrong in the world. So he took that and he was like, look, man, that's why I gotta be going harder. Baruch chapter 4, verse 28. So being returned, seek him 10 times more, man. And I pray that, I use what I did in the world. I look back at it, not to reminisce, but to take it and to be like, man, I was like this, and the Most High took me from this to this. So I got to be grateful for that. We all got to be grateful for that, right? Let's go to the book of Ephesians, chapter 3 and verse 8. Right, this is the book of Ephesians, chapter 3 and verse number 8. It says, I'm going to start at verse 7. Whereof I was made a minister according to the gift of the grace of God, which was given unto me by the effectual working of his power. Unto me, who am less than the least of all saints, is this grace given, that I should preach among the Gentiles the unsearchable riches of Christ. You see that? So he's saying, look, I was made a minister, right, by the grace of the Most High, and the gift that was given unto him. It's the book of 1 Timothy, chapter 1, verse, verse 11, right? It's 1 Timothy, like 1 Timothy chapter 1 and verse number 11. Right? Like, according to the glorious gospel of the blessed God, which was committed to my trust. And I thank Mahashiach Yahushua, our Lord, who have enabled me, for that he counted me faithful, putting me into the ministry. So what Paul is doing here is he's saying, like, look, the Lord counted me faithful, putting me into the ministry. But I'm nothing, though. I was persecuting the church. I was wicked in the world. But he nevertheless he counted me faithful, putting me into the ministry. So that's why Paul went so hard. That's why Paul was laboring more abundantly, because he knew that what he was doing in the world was so wrong. So he went to right those wrongs. He took that and used that as motivation to go harder, man. Because he understood when he came into the truth. He understood how detrimental his actions were, right? And how unjustifiable and evil his actions were. Therefore, he used that for motivation to go harder, right? That's why, to whom to whom Salaki, going back to that parable, right? Luke chapter 7. I don't want to misquote Yahweh, right? Luke chapter 7 and verse what? 47. Wherefore I say unto thee, her sins which are many are forgiven, for she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same love little. To whom little is forgiven, the same love little. So if we flip that, to whom much is forgiven, much the same is going to love more. You see that? The same is going to love much, and it's vice versa, right? We're going back to this First Timothy chapter 1 and verse 12. And I think it's like 13, who was before a blasphemer and a persecutor and injurious. So yeah, Paul, he still remembers what he did back in the world, but he's not looking back at it and reminiscing. Is like, oh man, the world, you know, man, I just want to be that old Saul again. Nah, he wasn't doing that. He was, hey, look, he was like, look, I was a blasphemer, I was a persecutor, I was an injurious person, but he obtained mercy nevertheless. Verse 14, and the grace of our Lord was exceeding abundant with faith and love, which is in Mahashiach Yahushua. This is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptation, that Mahashiach Yahushua came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief. So he said, look, I'm a chief sinner. Paul said, I'm a chief sinner, right? Because why? He was persecuting the church. You see that? And those are great sins. Killing people that believe in Yahweh, right? And you kill them innocently or put them in jail innocently. These are great transgressions. But nevertheless, the Lord forgave him and put him in this truth. Therefore, he was like, look, I got to go hard, man. That's why he was confounding the Jews, right? That's why when he came into the truth, he was laboring so much, man, right? And going through all hell for the Lord. And then give a damn because he gave his life unto him. Gave his life unto the Most High, right? Once he understood what his actions were doing. And also, here's another point. Most apostles and teachers of the New Testament actually attest to living evil lifestyles back into the world, or back in the world. When we go to the book of First Timothy, it's like in First Peter chapter 4. Let's go to First Peter chapter 4, verse 2. That he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lust of men, but to the will of the Most High. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles, when we walk in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine, revilings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries. So Peter's saying, look, for the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles when we walk in lasciviousness. So Peter is even saying that back in the world, he walked in lasciviousness, he walked in lust, he walked in excess of wine, he was reveling, he was banqueting. You know what I'm saying? So Peter's like, look, hey, even in the world, he was imperfect, man. You know, and he had sins before meeting and believing in Yahweh, right? It says what, verse 4, wherein they think it strange that you run not with them to the same excess of right, speaking evil of you. And that's why Peter could relate to these people that's coming into the truth, because he was just like them, right? Maybe not to the fullest extent, right? Maybe because Peter still lived in Israel, right? He still lived in Israel. You know, who Peter's talking to, you know, not all of them lived in Israel. Okay, even when we go to First Peter chapter 1, verse 1, he's writing to the strangers scattered throughout these Grecian provinces and cities, right? So they didn't necessarily live in Israel, but he has that ability to relate to them, because even before he met Yahweh, guess what? He wasn't perfect, man. He had sins, and that's the point that these apostles make. Let's go to the book of Hebrews chapter 10 and verse number 38. Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 38 says, now the just shall live by faith, but if any man draw back, my soul shall have no pleasure in him. But we are not of them who draw back unto perdition, but of them that believe to the saving of the soul. So The author of Hebrews says, look, we're not those that draw back onto perdition. We're not of that number. That's what he's saying, you know, and that's including himself. He's like, look, I don't want to draw back onto that. I don't want to go back into the world, right? So we understand that the apostles and writers of so-called New Testament, you know, pretty much all lived in wickedness aforetime before Yahweh Shah. This is Acts chapter 14 and verse number 15. And saying, sirs, why do ye these things? We also are men of like passions unto you, and preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities unto the living God, which made heaven and earth and the sea and all things that are therein. So we see here that Paul said unto the people, unto so-called Israelites Israelite Gentiles, that look, we are men of like passions unto you, meaning we are the same. We're the same. You know, Paul. That's why Paul could relate unto the Jews and onto the Grecians, onto the so-called Israelite Gentiles, because at one point in time he was just like them. Right? When you go to the book of Philippians chapter 3, that's why he could relate to the Pharisees. That's why he could confound the Pharisees. That's why he could confound certain Jews that didn't believe that Yahweh Shah was Mahashiach, because he's like, look, I was just like you. You know what I'm saying? I was just like you. So that's why you understand he could connect with them, right? He could connect with them and get down on their level because he was just like them in the world before coming into this truth. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 20. And unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. See, he becomes like them. Maybe he talks like them, or says or teaches in such a way to where they can understand in their advantage point. Right? He knew these advantage points. I'm gonna get this precept as well. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 9. Know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of the Most High. And such were some of you. So he's saying, look, some of you lived in these sins. Some of you did live in these sins, right? But ye are washed, but ye are sanctified, but you are justified in the name of the Lord Yahweh Shah and by the Spirit of our God. So he's saying, look, Paul's saying, look, you guys lived in these sins, and it was bad, but at the same time, now you're brought back unto the Father, you're brought back unto Yahweh Shah, you can repent, keep the commandments, and go hard. You know what I'm saying? Use that to go hard, man. That's why he's bringing this stuff up. Like he's bringing it. Look, such were some of you. You guys were in these same type of situations, but came into the truth, right? Through the Spirit of the Lord. Take that and you run with it, and you like, hey, use that as motivation, as Paul did, and through the Spirit, right? To right out our wrongs. And this woman that was, when we go back to this in the book of Luke, was crazy about this, because it's like this woman that was doing this to Yahweh Shah, she didn't count herself worthy to stand before him, right? Certain men weren't afraid to stand before Yahweh Shah. It was no big deal. But she didn't even count herself worthy to stand before him, right? She was doing this when he was in the house, right? She wasn't dabbing him up, or you know what I'm saying, slapping them on the chest or whatever, punching him around or throwing him around or something like that. She wasn't doing that. She was washing his feet with her tears. She was kissing his feet. She was ministering unto him. And didn't count herself worthy to even stand before him and make herself equal to him. And that's something that the Lord actually pays attention to, man. The Lord pays attention to everything, but that's something that he notes down. When you go to the book of Isaiah, chapter 66 and verse number 2, it says, for all those things have my hand made, and all those things have been, saith the Lord. But to this man will I look, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit, and trembleth at her word. And that's something that, and these are characteristics that she possesses. She was of a poor and contrite spirit. She trembled at the Most High's word, and she really, really wanted Yahweh Shah, right? Let me get this in the book of Mark, chapter 10, verse 48. Book of Mark, chapter 10, verse 48. And many charged him. Actually, I'm going to start at verse 46. Mark, chapter 10, verse 46. And they came to Jericho, and as he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a great number of people, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the highway side begging. And when he had heard that it was Yahushua of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, Yahushua, thou son of David, have mercy on me. So this man, Bartimaeus, was crying out unto Yahushua, saying, have mercy on him. And many charged him that he should hold his peace, but he cried the more a great deal, thou son of David, have mercy on me. So even though people was like saying, shut up, and sit down, he was crying even the more. He was calling out unto him, thou son of David, have mercy on me. He really wanted to present himself unto Yahushua. He showed that zeal. You understand? And Yahushua stood still and commanded him to be called. And they called the blind man, saying unto him, be of good cheer, rise, he calleth thee. And he, casting away his garment, rose and came to Yahushua. So he put away that old understanding, which is that garment. Put away that old understanding. In the book of Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 5, right? It says, I put off my coat, how shall I put it back on? I took off that old understanding. How am I going to put that back on again, man? If I take it off, now put it back on, man. And that's what Song of Solomon says. Verse 51. And Yahushua answered and said unto him, what wilt thou that I should do unto thee? The blind man said unto him, Lord, that I might receive my sight. And Yahushua said unto him, go thy way, thy faith hath made thee whole. And immediately he received his sight and followed Yahushua on the way. And we're about to see that too in the book of Luke chapter 7, right? Luke 7, verse 48. And he said unto her, thy sins are forgiven. But why? Let's keep reading. And they that sat at meat with him began to say within themselves, who is this that forgiveth sins also? And he said to the woman, thy faith hath saved thee. Go in peace. So he said, thy faith hath saved thee, and shalom. All right, go in peace. So he said, look, your faith has saved thee. So we see here, because we see that she has faith because of her works. So Christians, let's not get simple here. All right, let's not pretend like you can't show your faith by your works, man. Right? She's obviously showing her faith. The reason why all of this is happening is because she has faith. Yahushua identifies that. She's demonstrating the fact that she is sorry, that she has a broken and contrite spirit. She is demonstrating that by doing all these things that she's doing to Yahushua. So he's saying, look, thy faith have saved thee. Go in peace. Your faith has saved you. That's why it's so important to have faith. Yahushua didn't say because you're doing these mighty, mighty, mighty works. Right? Now, yeah, of course, it's by works of my faith. But it was not just because of her works. It was not just because of what she did. It was because she had faith in Yahushua. Therefore, that's what delivered her. Right? That's what delivered her. So thy faith have saved thee. Go in peace. Right? And that's basically the parable. It's nothing too deep, but it's really, it's one of my favorite parables. Right? It's one of my favorite parables. Now, just to touch on the flip side real quick before I cut this off to the spirit. This is the book of 2 Timothy, chapter 3, right? Now mind you, people that, let's say, because let's say, right, somebody comes in the truth at 10 years old. Somebody comes to the truth at 10 years old, start doing the works, believing in Yahushua. It's possible. Coming to the truth at 12 years old. You come into the truth at 14. You come into the truth at younger ages, or maybe even born into this thing. A lot of people that is in the truth, from what I've seen, what other people have seen as well, they are generally at the ages of 20, right? 20 to 30, 30 to 40, right? Of course, you do have people in the truth that are of the teenage sort of age range as well, of course, and of children in this thing. But generally, right, from what I've seen through the spirit, it would be people around like 20s, right? That's the majority. So at that point, and we know that of course the newer generation is also coming to this thing as well. But at that point, when somebody's 20 something in this world, they have lived a lot of wickedness. They have lived a lot of wickedness generally, right? In America, in Babylon the Great, if you are at the ages of in your 20s, you've done wickedness, right? You've done a great amount. Even at 14, right? Even at 14, you've done a great amount. But compare 14, right, to 25. That's an extra 10 years of wickedness. It's an extra 11 years of wickedness. Compare 14 to, let's say, 35. That's another 20 years. Mind you, that adult life, you know what I'm saying, as you get older, wickedness starts increasing, right? Boom. Reach your peak, boom. And all this other stuff starts being made manifest. So when we look at that, we understand that certain people, what I'm saying, that's even so-called or born into this truth, they may not have that same type of zeal, right? May not have that same type of zeal as somebody that came from the world. There was on fire in the world. Now they came into the truth. They understand how wicked they were living. And so when they understood that and the Lord opened their eyes, they took that and ran with it and started to labor and use that energy that they're using in the world and converted that to the truth. You have a lot of people that do that. Right? Now I'm gonna get this precept. 2 Timothy 4 and verse 15. And that from a child that has known the holy scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation through faith which is in Mahashiach Yahushua. So Timothy was on fire through the Spirit. He knew the faith from the child because his grandmother Lois and Timothy's mother taught him about the truth and raised him up in it. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 6 says, "Train up a child the way that he should go, so when he is old, he should not depart from it." So Timothy, he was raised up in the truth from a youth. Does that mean that now, since he wasn't really living wicked like that, because he was born into the truth, now that he's not on fire anymore? No, not necessarily, man. That still means that he's on fire, right? But that's why in the book of Luke, chapter 7, this parable that we're reading, it's in general terms. If you have little sins, you're going to love little, right? But you have a lot of sins and a lot of things that you're ashamed of, you're going to use that. You can use that to motivate you to go harder in order to right your wrongs. We know that if you do alms, for example, that can melt away sins. Let's say you don't really have a lot of sins. Of course, we sin on the day, right? But let's say you wasn't really in the world like that, or wicked, or you were raised up into the truth. Now it's like, man, that motivation on a certain level is just not there, right? As somebody else who was living wickedly in the world, and they understood that, they came to the truth, and they converted that and used that as motivation. But nevertheless, right? Nevertheless, to end it on the good note, and guess what? We can all pray unto the Most High for that spirit of zealousness. No matter if we were born into the truth, no matter if we came into the truth at 14, 15, no matter if we came into the truth at 25, whatever, we can still pray earnestly for that spirit to be on fire, right? This book of Revelation, chapter 3 and verse number 18. I counsel thee to buy me gold trodden in the fire, that thou mayest be rich in white raiment, right? Actually, I'm going to close it out, right? Revelation 3 and verse 18. I counsel thee to buy me gold trodden in the fire, that thou mayest be rich in white raiment, that thou mayest be clothed, right? And that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear, and anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou mayest see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Be zealous, therefore, and repent, man. So with that, all praise to Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, right? Barakatah, all praise to the Most High God, Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, right? The water for all that's been tuning in through the Spirit and tuning in, right? Or is going to tune in, Most High willing, through the Spirit. Hey, Kwame Yasha Allah. Shalom.